All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to class. Why do I have this page over here? This is not supposed to be. Huh. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Friday to everybody. Please let me know if I'm visible and audible. Please let me know if I'm visible as well as audible. Am I? I should be. Good morning, ma'am. All good, ma'am. All clear, ma'am. Okay, one. Great. All right, welcome to class, everybody. Very, very good to see you all. Today, I have a very, very exciting topic for you. I'm Hafsa Malik, of course. What what do I teach? I teach psychology. I have my coffee here. I have my PPT here. Let's get started. I'm really excited to discuss all of this with you. आज हम डिस्कस करेंगे न्यूरोसाइकोलॉजिकल टेस्ट. ये आपकी क्लिनिकल साइकोलॉजी का एक बहुत बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कंपोनेंट है. ना सिर्फ क्लिनिकल साइकोलॉजी लेकिन आपका जो नेट एग्जाम स्पेशली जो आपके स्टेट एग्जाम्स लाइक यूपीएचएससी एंड स्टफ वो आपको इनमें इन डेप्थ क्वेश्चंस भी कभी पूछते हैं. ऑलराइट. So it is very, very important that you become sort of an expert in these tests. Just understanding what each test does and what each test represents is more than enough. Right? If some of you clinical students would like me to do, each of these tests in depth. अगर clinical psychology के students यहाँ पे हैं और वो चाहते हैं कि मैं एक एक test in depth कर लूँ, तो आप उसके लिए नीचे comments में request कर सकते हो. All right. Today I'm going to do an overview of neuropsychological testing for you. And yes, I have the Indian test as well. There is the PGI battery, there is AIMS, and there is the Nimhans battery as well. All right. Let's get started. चलिए चलिए. So, first of all, why do we need cognitive assessment? I have said this a lot of times, so I would love to hear from all of you कि हम cognitive assessment का इस्तेमाल क्यों करते हैं? Aren't there intelligence tests? Then why do we need this? इसकी ज़रूरत क्यों पड़ती है? Why do we have to get people to draw clocks? Why do we have to get people to, just name objects? Why do we have to get people to do a short-term memory test? क्यों करना जब intelligence test हैं? बताइए. Good morning, ma'am. Huh? Good morning. Ma'am, Puja festival starts. Congratulations. I mean, happy Durga Puja to all those of you who are celebrating. Okay? I hope you have a wonderful week. अब मुझे बताओ आप ये क्यों करते हैं? Now we got to understand that intelligence tests will at the most tell us about learning disabilities. But what about dementias? Dementias या neurocognitive disorders जिनको कहते हैं. Right? We have mild neurocognitive impairment, we have major neurocognitive impairment. अंकिता उसके लिए दूसरी वीडियो है वो बाद में अभी आप इस पे फोकस करो. Absolutely. You see, now not only do we want to check for functioning and giftedness and how high somebody's IQ is and how to compare them with their classmates or whatever, we also want to know whether there is impairment. काफी एक्सीडेंट्स होते हैं. आपको पता है कितने रोड एक्सीडेंट्स होते हैं? हजारों में, लाखों में एक साल में रोड एक्सीडेंट्स होते हैं. और ज्यादातर ब्रेन डैमेज उसमें होती है क्योंकि वो लोग जनरली हेलमेट्स के बगैर ड्राइव कर रहे होते हैं. राइट. If you check the statistics of the country, you will see how many road accidents take place. Now, if I actually want to find out somebody fell off and they fell sort of, with their head on the ground. So the maximum impairment or damage is going to be probably in the brain. If I want to see particularly where the problem is and what has happened, is there damage to the brain or has their brain actually not been affected much? तो वो सब चीजें मुझे cognitive screening test से पता चलेंगी. These are known as tests of cognitive screening or they are also known as neuropsychological tests. ओके. ये चीजें हमें इंटेलिजेंस टेस्ट नहीं बता सकता. इवन दो वेशलर्स स्केल नंबर 3, वेशलर्स एडल्ट इंटेलिजेंस स्केल नंबर 3 has hold and don't hold tests, but it's not the same as understanding a person's orientation. All of this, particularly sometimes even basic functions are lost. Okay, so it is very important to take these cognitive tests and cognitive screening tests and try to understand whether somebody has any kind of pathology or they are going to develop a kind of pathology. ठीक है. तो ये सिर्फ हम इसलिए स्क्रीनिंग का मतलब क्या होता है कि हम अर्ली डिटेक्शन करना चाहते हैं इनफैक्ट हम कुछ चीज होने से पहले डिटेक्ट करना चाहते हैं। आप देखेंगे डिमेंशियाज में ओरिएंटेशन खराब होना स्टार्ट हो जाती है पहले से ही। ओके, मेजर एंड माइनर न्यूरोकॉग्निटिव प्रॉब्लम्स। So we need to know over here, ma'am, exact location of the impairment also. Mostly, yes. Those are tests particularly for lateralization and localization. There are also tests which only test basic functions, like the MiniMental status examination. वो executive function नहीं check करता है, वो basic function देखता है कि है या नहीं, right? So some tests will particularly check for finger tapping. Finger tapping say, can I tell that if one finger is functioning fine, the other is not? Can I say lateralization में problem है? One particular lobe or one particular hemisphere of the brain might have more damage than the other. So these tests are utterly ingenious. I absolutely love the thought of, discussing these tests. They are absolutely amazing. See, it's not easy to open up the brain. आप अगर even CT scan करोगे, उससे maybe even better it is to go and do one of these cognitive screening tests. Okay, MRIs are very expensive. You just have to take a paper and a pen and go ahead and do one of these tests. What you need to understand is कि brain को हम खोल के ऐसे नहीं देख सकते. It's not that simple. Brain surgery is least preferred. Nobody wants to undergo and nobody wants to do a brain surgery, open brain surgery, unless absolutely necessary. All right. हाँ जी, तो इस वजह से हम क्या करते हैं, हम स्क्रीन करते हैं कि देखो अगर इस इंसान को डिमेंशिया होने वाला है, हो रहा है, then we can control effectively, we can treat better. If somebody is showing fine, if somebody is showing neural damage, nerve damage, we can treat and we can help them more effectively if there is early detection. Okay, all right, definitely, yeah. Okay, चलिए. So we will see a series of tests that we can use. ठीक है, हम काफी सारे टेस्ट यहाँ पे यूज कर सकते हैं, ऐसा नहीं है कि एक ही टेस्ट है सो यू मस्ट यूज. नाउ ऑफन टाइम्स व्हाट ऑल डू वी रिक्वायर इन अ कॉग्निटिव स्क्रीनिंग टेस्ट. अगर हम न्यूरोसाइकोलॉजिकल टेस्ट की बात करें तो कौन सा आइडियल टेस्ट है और एक आइडियल टेस्ट के फीचर्स क्या होते हैं. हाई सेंसिटिविटी. सेंसिटिविटी बताइए क्या होता है. इफ somebody has damage, I should accurately be able to see it. Okay, that means the test is sensitive enough to detect damage if there is damage. है ना. what if हम सबको नॉर्मल 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 बता दें लेकिन एक्चुअली उन लोगों में डैमेज है, कॉग्निटिव इम्पेयरमेंट है, कॉग्निटिव प्रॉब्लम्स हैं, है ना. Okay, then we also have specificity. Now, is it also important that the test doesn't tag everybody as abnormal? हाँ, अब जिनको प्रॉब्लम है उनको हम डिटेक्ट करते हैं, बट व्हाट अबाउट पीपल हु कम टू अस विद नो प्रॉब्लम. ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि डिप्रेशन है किसी को और उनकी कॉग्निटिव प्रोसेसिंग उस वजह से थोड़ी स्लो हो गई है. ऐसा भी हो सकता है कि किसी को व्हाट डू आई से इज इन अ स्टेट ऑफ वाज इन अ स्टेट ऑफ डिलीरियम 2 to 3 days of normal functioning है. व्हाट इफ somebody is just sad, or what if somebody just needs to study and doesn't study, their parents have brought them to you. तो वहां पे आप ये चेक कर पाने चाहिए कि देखो इसमें प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, देयर इज नो कॉग्निटिव इम्पेयरमेंट, maybe they just need to work a little harder, and that is known as specificity. Not incorrectly diagnosing somebody as having problems if they don't have problems. Okay, so correctly rejecting, you can say, or not, yeah, correctly rejecting those who don't have problems, who don't have impairment. Ah, correct, absolutely. Okay, then it should also have a positive predictive value and it should take minimal time to conduct, right? Conduct, sorry. See, now here we should actually be able to predict symptoms, or we should actually be able to predict the condition. नहीं तो क्या फायदा अगर आप स्क्रीनिंग टूल यूज कर रहे हो और वो डैमेज प्रिडिक्ट नहीं करता है, मतलब द डिमेंशिया इज गोइंग टू गेट सिवियर इफ वी डोंट ट्रीट इट. व्हाट इफ इट डजंट गेट सिवियर, और व्हाट इफ इट एक्चुअली गेट्स बेटर ऑन इट्स ओन. That's not great. We should have a good prediction value over here, right? And finally, as less time it takes to conduct, the better. आप सोचो, you are testing somebody probably already with dementia, or somebody who has had an accident, or a child even with some type of cognitive impairment. Do you think they want to sit there for hours and hours? ये देखिए, ये just beginning में screening के tools हैं. ऐसा नहीं कि इसी के बेसिस पे हम डायग्नोसिस करेंगे। इसके बाद हम दूसरे टेस्ट एडमिनिस्टर करेंगे विच वी आर गोइंग टू लर्न अबाउट एज वेल, और वो टेस्ट हमें ये बताएंगे कि डायग्नोसिस यहाँ पे अप्रोप्रिएट रहेगा या नहीं रहेगा। ये स्क्रीनिंग टूल्स हैं, छोटे छोटे टेस्ट। सो शुड दे बी वेरी लेंथी एंड टाइम कंज्यूमिंग? 3-4 घंटे आप स्क्रीन करो? नहीं यार, who will sit with you for 4 hours? You think patient wants to sit with you for 3 hours to do screening? नहीं, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, not more than that. So we will see. We will look at the mini cog. We will look at the mini mental status examination. We will look at modified में क्या difference है. We will look at the Montreal cognitive assessment, and that is about it. There is also clock drawing test, which is the simplest measure of actually, some type of particular dementias. ठीक है? आप देखो यहाँ पे क्या होता है, ओरिएंटेशन ही खराब हो जाती है। ये देखो आप, इन केसेस ऑफ हेमी नेग्लेक्ट द होल विजुअल फील्ड वन साइड इज नेग्लेक्टेड कंप्लीटली, ओके, ड्यू टू सम काइंड ऑफ ब्रेन डैमेज, पॉसिबली इन द पैराइटल लोब। अगर पैराइटल लोब में कोई प्रॉब्लम्स हैं तो एक साइड हम कभी कभी बॉडी का और एक साइड हमारे पूरे विजुअल फील्ड का हम कंप्लीटली इग्नोर कर देते हैं, हमें समझ भी नहीं आता है कि वो साइड अभी है या एग्जिस्ट करता है। So you see this person messed up orientation will draw all of the 12, 1 to 12 of the clock in one side only. Here also you see क्या हो रहा है, in very clear symptoms of Alzheimer's, also in deteriorating conditions, they will not be able to do a proper clock drawing. Okay, ठीक है। तो you see, very very simple test, takes seconds but gives you a lot of information. Even encephalitis can be sometimes detected if it is causing a lot of cognitive impairment, then it can be detected through or screened for through the clock drawing test. चलो ठीक है, now let's take a look at what is happening. चलिए, कितना टाइम लग रहा है इन सारे टेस्ट में? आप देखेंगे 10 मिनट, 15 मिनट, 3 मिनट, 5 मिनट. सो दे आर good tests. If you check their sensitivity and specificity values also, you can pause and take a screenshot, no problem. So if you check यहाँ पे sensitivity और specificity के values भी अगर आप check करेंगे, you will see that they're quite high, 70, 80s and so on, right? Now the mini mental status examination does not check for executive function. मैं आपको फिर से दिखाऊंगी. There are some verbal items here. There are some, I don't know if there are non-verbal, which was facial. So mostly though, there are verbal items here, and there will be some short-term verbal recall as well. ठीक है? Reading, mostly this is verbal, but this checks for very basic functions. ये जो है ये बिल्कुल basic functions के लिए check करता है और ये executive functions के लिए नहीं check करता है. Now there are 19 items and you have to get a score of 30. Here आप ऐसा सोचो, जिसको 25 या लेस आते हैं ना, उसकी clear impairment है. They are very very basic questions, very basic questions. All right, like days of the week, okay, recall this word, okay, I just told you a word, just repeat it and so on. Basic writing, basic verbal skills. So if anybody gets 25 or less, that means there is clear damage and there is very very apparent damage. मतलब ये जो severe damage होगी ना, वो ये detect करेगा. अब यहाँ पे हम executive functions measure ही नहीं कर रहे हैं, तो क्या ये subtle executive problems को measure करेगा? Anything which is sophisticated and executive in nature, is your mini mental status examination going to measure it? You see, in the modified version also, you have some attention and calculation, but you don't have any particular executive functions being measured. नहीं, it's quite a simple test, and like I told you, it is sort of a gross overview of any major dysfunction. अगर कुछ बड़ी या बहुत severe dysfunction हो तो वो हमें mini mental status examination से हम detect कर पाएंगे. ठीक है? That's about it. This does not check for subtle defects. That means educated individuals, highly educated जो होते हैं, अगर उनमें damage भी होगी वो यहाँ पे हम detect नहीं कर पाएंगे. Therefore, the Montreal cognitive assessment has been developed. ठीक है, ये executive functions के लिए check करता है. And therefore, this can also check for subtle defects. And therefore, this is better applied to individuals who are highly educated and whose dysfunction you might miss in the mini mental status examination. ठीक है, तो Montreal cognitive assessment अगर आप actually देखेंगे ये काफी similar है इन्वेंट्रीज, है ना। ये टेस्ट जो हैं, इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स जो हैं, काफी सिमिलर है ना। व्हाट आर वी एक्चुअली डूइंग और व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस? देयर आर स्लाइट डिफरेंसेस एंड दैट इज व्हाट मेक्स ईच टेस्ट डिफरेंट फ्रॉम वन अनदर। बाकी के जो सब टेस्ट हैं या जो आपके आइटम्स हैं वो सेम कैटेगरीज के हैं, बिकॉज आफ्टर ऑल ये सारे कॉग्निटिव डेफिसिट के लिए स्क्रीन कर रहे हैं ना। ऑल ऑफ दीज टेस्ट आर आफ्टर ऑल चेकिंग फॉर कॉग्निटिव स्क्रीनिंग और दे आर जस्ट चेकिंग फॉर कॉग्निटिव इम्पेयरमेंट. So here what is important is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment does check for executive functioning. And because it checks for executive functioning, it is a lot better for your educated and highly educated people. ठीक है. Let me know if there are any doubts so far. मैम सारे टेस्ट के लिए सेंसिटिविटी एंड स्पेसिफिक स्कोर सेम होगा? डिफरेंस तो है ना. सेम कैसे होगा? सेम होगा तो फिर एक ही टेस्ट रहता. व्हाई डू वी नीड 4 different tests then? Ingenious. You see? This is the sensitivity score and this is the specificity score. All right. It is not the same. There are differences, there are slight differences. Same होता तो फिर एक ही टेस्ट कर लेते. Why do multiple tests? Clock drawing we've discussed. I'll see if I've attached the mini cog here. Mini cog will probably be there later. Or I will explain it to you. Mini cog is actually really cool. 3 words दिए जाते हैं for recall, verbal recall. Okay? Very simple test. You might get asked कि इसमें क्या पूछते हैं. तो आपको 3 letters देते हैं recall करने के लिए. They can be anything. You can give it to uneducated or illiterates also. Word can be anything. I say bad, rat, and then ball or whatever. Does not matter. Okay. Out of the 3 words, if they only recall 2, that means we ask them to draw a clock, or that means there is definitely some sign of probably a problem. If they are not able to recall any of the words, तो फिर definitely problem है, right? Working memory gets affected in Alzheimer's, can I say? Encoding नहीं होती है Alzheimer's में. And even in any kind of amnesia, anterograde amnesia, working memory is an executive function, and therefore in any kind of dementia or in any kind of executive impairment, executive functions जहां भी हमारी affect होती हैं, चाहे वो traumatic brain injury की वजह से हो या चाहे वो किसी dementia की वजह से हो, वो इसको हमें determine करने देगा. Okay. Working memory or the encoding of memory or the processing of memory is an executive function, is related. Okay. All right, not entirely, but working memory related, there are executive functions. In the sense, when we decide which information to actually process for long-term memory and not, that is where your executive memory or your executive functioning also helps. So यहाँ पे we are checking for 2 things. We are checking for encoding level also, which is a function of our hippocampus, and we are checking for our working memory capacity also, which is influenced by the frontal lobe. तो यहाँ पे अगर तीनों में से तीनों वर्ड्स रिकॉल होते हैं तो नो प्रॉब्लम, गेट द क्लॉक ड्राइंग टेस्ट, योर डन. अगर नहीं होते हैं तो डेफिनेटली इंडिकेट्स इम्पेयरमेंट. इसके बाद वी ऑल्सो गिव क्लॉक ड्राइंग टेस्ट, and that helps us understand whether we should check further or not. Okay, so we are done with the screening tools. Let's move on to proper batteries. All right, let's move on to proper batteries. We'll look at the larger tests. ठीक है. So the first, factor analytic battery over here, Halsted actually started developing this in 1935, but was published in 1947. This is the first factor analytic battery. इसको बैटरी क्यों कहते हैं? क्योंकि इसमें काफी सारे सब टेस्ट या टेस्ट होते हैं. All right, you will see in each of these batteries going forward, there will be multiple tests, sometimes 20 tests. I think in this there are around 10 or 11. ओके, ऑल राइट. तो ये इसमें टाइम लगता है. Are we still screening here, or are we actually looking to dive deeper into understanding particularly what impairment there is? अब देखो, बैटरी अप्रोच जो अब हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं, इसमें हम अब सिंपली स्क्रीन नहीं कर रहे हैं. इसमें हम इन डेप्थ इंफॉर्मेशन पाएंगे कि देखो लोकलाइजेशन या पर्टिकुलरली किस एरिया में डैमेज प्रोबेबल है, या फिर also not just या फिर we will also check for whether there is damage in a particular lobe or particular hemisphere of the brain. ठीक है, पर्टिकुलरली कौन सी डैमेज है वो हम इन बैटरी से अंडरस्टैंड करेंगे और यहाँ हमें इन डेप्थ पर्सपेक्टिव मिलेगा. चलिए, चलिए, absolutely screening is done. Now if you find a low score, अगर आपको लगता है कि यहाँ पे किसी भी टेस्ट पे लो स्कोर आ रहा है, तो फिर आप बैटरी एडमिनिस्टर करेंगे ना. बिकॉज रिमेंबर, ऑलवेज विद डिटेक्टिंग abnormality we need to be very 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 careful. Why is that? Because you don't want to label somebody, right? It could ruin their whole life. You cannot call somebody cognitive impaired or cognitively impaired if they are not. So you need to double check, triple check, quadruple check until you are sure. Let's talk about the Halsted rate and neuropsychological test battery. ठीक है? तो large variety of tests हैं यहाँ पे. Finger tapping, you have the musical seashore test. This is going to cover all appropriate domains for us. चलिए, तो क्या क्या होगा इसमें. कैटेगरी टेस्ट इज अ टेस्ट ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शन. डिसीजन मेकिंग इज रिक्वायर्ड. ये देखो आप. Then tactual performance tests. Are we able to tell the texture or not? Right? Later, we are also going to check musical seashore. Are we able to hear properly? Here we also screen for aphasia. Aphasia के लिए भी हम screen करते हैं. Some tests will even check for receptive as well as expressive. ठीक है? Trail making test again checks planning. You draw a number, like there are dots, right? You have to connect one, then two. You have to connect. Okay, like you used to do puzzles in the newspaper. Do you remember? आपने कभी किया है? ड्राइंग होती थी न्यूज़पेपर में और उसको डॉट्स कनेक्ट करके बनाना होता है. और एक के बाद एक डॉट्स. It is similar to that. It's not the same. It is similar. So we also have sensory perceptual examination, grip strength. Do you have strength in your grip or not? There, lateral dominance examination. Is your language function working fine? Are you comprehending? Are you understanding? And so on. ठीक है? Okay. मोटर डेक्सटेरिटी भी हम यहाँ चेक करते हैं. वी चेक फॉर साइकोमोटर इंटीग्रेशन और सेंसरी मोटर इंटीग्रेशन ऑल्सो. वॉट एवर यू टेक इन, आर यू एबल टू कम्युनिकेट टू द ब्रेन? हाउ डज द ब्रेन कमांड द मोटर ऑर्गन्स एंड सो ऑन. ठीक है. नाउ हियर 15 years and above is what the age is required to be. There are separate tests for children. ठीक है. तो बच्चों के लिए अलग टेस्ट है. अडल्ट के लिए जो टेस्ट है ये 15 साल की उम्र से एप्लीकेबल है टू वट एवर एज. ऑलराइट, प्लीज आस्क. बाल भास्कर क्या? प्लीज आस्क इन केस देयर आर एनी डाउट्स. दीज आर जस्ट द सब टेस्ट. ओके, यू कैन सी देम हियर आल्सो. Finger oscillation is just the finger tapping test, which will tell you which hemisphere are both hemispheres working fine or not. It was the first factor analyzed neuropsychological battery, and the first factor that he came up with was biological intelligence. Can I just say fluid intelligence? क्योंकि fluid intelligence actually हमारे brain functioning के काफी in-depth explanation देता है. Can I say biological intelligence is just your G factor or actually your fluid intelligence? Okay. All right. So what does this tell us? This tells us a lot about how the spontaneous processing, parallel processing is working in the brain, how the visuospatial processing is working in the brain, how reasoning is working in the brain. Now, this is not particularly a test of executive function. ऐसा नहीं है कि ये टेस्ट ओनली एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शन के लिए चेक करता है, लेकिन ये एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शन को इंक्लूड करता है. Category test and trail making tests are tests of executive function. I'll write EE here. ठीक है? UC checks for critical flicker frequency also, aphasia screening test, sensory perceptual test, and so on. Okay. So यहाँ पे क्या क्या है? Abstraction, power, directional, and then biological intelligence is also checked for here. If we are good to go, we will move on to the LIRIA Nebraska battery. ठीक है. तो इसमें मेन कंपोनेंट्स क्या आपको याद रखना है. इफ यू आर अ क्लिनिकल स्टूडेंट, प्लीज मेमोराइज और ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड ईच ऑफ द सबसेट्स एंड ट्राई टू रिमेंबर व्हाट ऑल हैज बीन यूज्ड ओवर हियर. इफ यू आर नॉट अ क्लिनिकल स्टूडेंट, you do not need to remember that. You just need to know कि where was this created, who created it. In 1947 it was finally published, and then just an overview of what it measures. ठीक है. ओवरव्यू में क्या क्या मेजर करता है ये, बस वो आपको पता होना चाहिए. Now we see that this is a factor analytic approach. Yes? Okay. We will also look at particularly what is the Luria Nebraska battery measuring. Okay. So this the Halsted Rayton battery was one of the first tests to help us understand कि global impairment क्या होता है. Global doesn't mean impairment of the whole world. This just means कि our overall brain impairment क्या है. And the depth to which it explained impairment was a big deal in 1947. तब बहुत बड़ी बात थी. Alright. चलिए. Now, here we talk about what do we talk about? This is our Luria Nebraska battery, which is based on the hypothesis testing approach or more on a theoretical basis. And this was not, published by Luria himself. Charles Golden, I think his name is Gold or Golden. I'm not sure, please check. Although I think it is Golden only. Okay, 1981 to 82 में ये publish हुआ था. All right. Now, the Luria Nebraska battery is obviously based on whose work? Whose work? Alexander Luria's work. Now, we know very, very clearly aphasia, agnosia, this and that was detected by Luria. Alexander Luria ने past theory की भी foundation दी है. So, we know very, very clearly what we are going to talk about here. Very similar, very similar. So, we are going to check for proper, in fact, he is the one who's spoken a lot about localization. Brain localization, and that is how we have agnosia, aphasias and this and that, apraxia, ataxia हम understand करते हैं उसी के basis पे. Very, very good. Very, very good. So here also we're going to understand specific damage and we are also going to check for localization, lateralization and all of that. ठीक है, चलिए. Okay. What does it provide useful information in? In diagnosis and treatment of brain damage. Obviously, what else is it going to do? It consists of 269 separately administered and scored items, which were obviously selected very, very empirically. Sensitivity और specificity को ध्यान में रखते हुए. तो ये in comparison to आपके previous test में वो clearly factor analytic approach था. इसमें थोड़ा सा थ्योरी बेस्ड है. किसकी थ्योरी से हमने ये लिया है? अलेक्जेंडर ल्यूरिया की थ्योरी से. अगर आपने बायोलॉजिकल बेसिस स्टडी किया है तो आपने वर्ड अफेशिया, एग्नोसिया ये सब सुना होगा. तो ब्रेन लोकलाइजेशन पे काफी स्टडी की है अलेक्जेंडर लूरिया ने. एंड देयरफॉर इस टेस्ट में भी हम वही देखेंगे. हम पर्टिकुलर स्पेसिफिक ब्रेन डैमेज चेक करेंगे और उससे क्या बिहेवियरल प्रॉब्लम्स आती हैं वो हम यहाँ पे डिटेक्ट करने की कोशिश करेंगे. All right. So if you look at it, you will see again very, very similar. The names are different. Okay. The names of the subtests will be different, but you can see clearly that we are measuring pretty much what we were measuring in the previous test. Now, this is obviously a little more advanced because it was published around almost 40 years later. So here we are checking motor function also. सेम परसेप्चुअल सेंसरी फंक्शन वहां भी हम चेक कर रहे थे. वी वर चेकिंग फॉर लैंग्वेज बट हियर पर्टिकुलरली वी चेक फॉर रिसेप्टिव एज वेल एज एक्सप्रेसिव अफेशिया. ठीक है, रीडिंग, रिकग्निशन, स्पेलिंग, राइटिंग, एरिथमेटिक, यू हैव दिस इन योर इंटेलिजेंस टेस्ट ऑल्सो एज वेल एज मेमोरी एंड इंटेलेक्चुअल फंक्शनिंग. तो हम देख सकते हैं कि क्लियरली ये प्रीवियस टेस्ट के जैसे ही ऑलमोस्ट वो सारी फंक्शंस मेजर करता है. Very, very similar. Some differences. Here you have again tactile tests also. Maybe not the same test is used, but then it is measured. ठीक है. Okay, now here it is very important to know कि यहाँ 2 to 3 point scale पे हर एक item measure होता है. A score of 0 on the item actually indicates normality. A score of 1 or 2 indicates abnormality. ठीक है. तो जितना यहाँ पे टेस्ट पे ज्यादा high score उतनी ज्यादा abnormality. Got it? The lower the score, the lesser the abnormality, and the higher the score, the more the abnormality. Very, very important to understand here. All right, then what else do we have? Okay, quantitative scales only. What else will we have? Chaliye. Here also you can check this 269 items have 11 content scales. and then we convert these into T scores standardization के लिए. If you are asked again, this specific detail is good for clinical psychology students, not required for NET students, not required for other exam students. मीन यहाँ पे 50 होगा अगर T score से हम standardize करते हैं, और हर एक standard deviation का value 10 होगा, just like you have in anything standardized for the T score. All right, okay, we don't care, although you will need to understand or you will need to remember what all is measured here. ठीक है? Rhythm, tactile, visual, receptive, expressive speech, writing, reading, arithmetic, memory, intellectual processes, just like we saw earlier as well. Okay? Content scales are 11, and therefore all of these 11 aspects are measured. That's okay. Now here pathognomonic scale क्या है? Okay? Pathognomonic scale actually means that this is indicative. Low performance या high score here, high score will indicate bad performance ना. तो यहाँ पे अगर particularly high score एक scale पे है, वो किसी particular तरह की damage indicate करता है या नहीं? Indicative of specific damage means pathognomonic. I'll tell you what that means particularly. मतलब if I have a problem with expressive speech and expressive speech only, not speech comprehension, can I say that damage is in Broca's area? Broca's aphasia ये indicate करता है ना? That is what I mean by pathognomonic scale. Very, very good. Very, very good. And if there is a problem only with tactile, then again I will understand. If there is a problem only with memory and only short-term memory, then also I will understand कि damage कहाँ से आ रहा है. So not only left hemisphere scales, but actually hemispheric scales. Okay. One for the right hemisphere and one for the left hemisphere. So this particularly checks for localization and lateralization. ये आपको याद रखना. Not just left hemisphere scale, there is a right hemisphere scale also. Again, I can see that if there is only problem with expressive as well as comprehending speech, the problem only lies in the left hemisphere. अगर particularly सिर्फ language के साथ problems हैं, तो हम ऐसा कह सकते हैं कि left hemisphere में ही problem है, right में problem नहीं है. और फिर आप सोचो कि ओरिएंटेशन में ही प्रॉब्लम है और लैंग्वेज में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, तो फिर हम इजीली कह सकते हैं कि राइट हेमिस्फीयर में प्रॉब्लम है, लेफ्ट में नहीं है. समझ रहे हैं आप? तो यहाँ पे 3 स्केल्स हैं आपकी. एक तो पर्टिकुलर लोकलाइजेशन इंडिकेट करता है और बाकी की 2 लेटरलाइजेशन इंडिकेट करती हैं. अगर इक्वल डैमेज है लेफ्ट और राइट हेमिस्फीयर में, तो कोई यहाँ पे लेटरलाइजेशन नहीं हो रहा है, राइट? Then both your hemispheres are fine, and that's okay. Sorry, both your hemispheres are not fine, and that is not okay. दोनों में डैमेज है तो अच्छा नहीं है, obviously. It is better to have less severe damage, and therefore, if damage were lateralized, there would still be hope of the patient, still being able to function mostly. चलो ठीक है. Please let me know if this is clear. Especially for clinical students, please pay attention. Also for UPSC. Left and right hemisphere scales क्या indicate करते हैं? Especially the motor and tactile scale items. Okay? Which particularly involve comparison between the left and the right sides of the body. तो जो motor scales हैं जहाँ पे आपकी motor movement test होती है, like I told you, finger tapping, finger oscillation, finger dexterity, ये clearly indicate करता है अगर दोनों fingers में same तरह की, दोनों हाथों के fingers में, obviously you'll say ma'am any two fingers I'll take, not like that, yeah. Any two hands, have only two hands. दो हाथों की कोई भी fingers आप compare करो, index finger and index finger. If they don't have the same kind of tactile or motor power, that means that there is something wrong either with sensation. This checks for sensation, and this checks for motor movement. Obviously, this checks for outgoing commands from the brain, and ये clearly हमें comparison देता है left और right hemisphere में. So this is very very important, very very important. गुड मॉर्निंग मैम, कब से क्लास चल रहा है, मुझे पता ही नहीं चला, ऐसा कैसे हो गया ज्योति? चलिए कोई बात नहीं. इट्स ओके, डोंट नीड टू फील ऑफ. ओके, कम ऑन कम ऑन कम ऑन. आर वी गुड टू गो? लेट मी नो इफ वी आर गुड टू गो. Let me know if we're good to go. That is about it for your LIRIA Nebraska questionnaire. Please remember that there are 269 items. चलो ठीक है. Mental status examinations we have done, so we'll move on. MiniMental status भी मैंने आपको explain कर दिया है. There are 19 questions. There are 30 points. 25 से lower जिसका score वो क्या उसको further screening के लिए हम send करेंगे. Alright? So you see clearly there will be cognitive decline in all dementias, particularly Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is actually quite common. In fact, do you know that Alzheimer's is linked to, at least I read research 4 or 5 years ago, that Alzheimer's is strongly linked to diabetes. 1 in every 3 diabetes patients, especially the uncontrolled diabetics, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 actually starts to develop Alzheimer's symptoms. So read up, let me know. Quite interesting. Chaliye, all right. Alzheimer's is the most common type of neurocognitive impairment that we witness. Old age related. Okay. Forgetting and all of that, हम बोलते हैं कि बस old age है and कहाँ कहाँ Alzheimer's हो जाता है तो पता ही नहीं चलता. हाँ जी, type 2. Type 1 is genetic and type 1 is seen in younger individuals. Type 2. Chaliye. All right, Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Also, I have told you. Now tell me one thing. What is this better for? Does this check for executive function or not? क्या ये executive function के लिए check करता है? बताइए. This has really good sensitivity. Let's go, ma'am. Where do you want me to go, Ishu? Absolutely. It checks for executive function also. Then we have my absolute. This is not my absolute favorite. The Wisconsin card sorting test is, but okay. This is absolutely amazing as well. All right. I think this was developed in 1948. It was co-normed with one of the other tests. No, I think it was co-normed with Stanford Binet or something like that. Okay. First described her test in 1938, but ये publish हुआ था, I think 1948 में. Do check, but that's what I think it is. चलिए, now this is the Bender Gestalt Visual Motor Test or the Bender Visual Motor Gestalt Test. I know it's a tongue twister, but the test is really cool. करना क्या होता है? Basically, you ask your participant or your client or your patient to look at these figures. ये जो drawings हैं, इनकी तरफ देखो आप. Although this is not timed as far as I remember, but it takes around only 10 to 20 minutes. Right? तो क्या करना है? Whatever figures are drawn here, single time you put your pencil down. Participant को कहना है pencil नीचे डाला, उठाना नहीं है उसके बाद. You put it down and you draw the figure without any disturbances. All right. You see there is a connecting line here, so there is no need to lift up your hand again. This is to indicate visual motor coordination and visual motor maturity, psychomotor coordination basically. ठीक है, इसको performance test कह सकते हैं guys? क्या इसको performance test कर सकते हैं? कह सकते हैं? Okay, what is happening here? क्लास पर ध्यान दो प्रगति, क्लास पर ध्यान दो प्रगति. Okay, all right, absolutely. Yes, because you are drawing. Okay, chalo, ठीक है. Subject is shown each figure and asked to copy it onto a piece of paper. है ना? वही तो करना है. All right. And then they are scored based on accuracy and other characteristics. Time taken is also important. Therefore, we don't give a fixed time. People who take very, very long and want to, overdo and all, we'll check that also. But here we will want to check accuracy and what else and time taken and all. ठीक है. वर्थहाइमर के फिगर्स हैं ये, तो आपको पूछेंगे कि बेंडर विजुअल मोटर जेस्टाल्ट टेस्ट uses whose figures? You can basically say psychologist Max Wertheimer's figures are used here. ये shapes उन्हीं की हैं, उन्हीं की theories से हैं. ठीक है. All right. Perceptual motor skills are basically measured here. perceptual motor development is measured and it gives an indication of neurological, मतलब जो psychomotor ability है ना, that also indicates some kind of intelligence. That means our eyes are easily able to coordinate with our hands. That requires our sensory and motor systems to be intact. जो sensation यहाँ से जा रही है वो exactly communicate हो रही है और motor pathways के through वो अच्छे से communicate हो रही है, तो वो हम यहाँ पे check करेंगे. Okay, all right. That is basically it. Now, what is this? I teach on Unacademy. I am the top educator for psychology. And if you want to come study with me, I teach not only this, but everything. I teach for GATE, I teach for clinical psychology, and I obviously teach for NET-JRF. There have been many, many toppers from my batch. If you would like to be one of those as well, or if you want to just simply come learn with me, go ahead and subscribe to my batch on Unacademy and use the code HAF10. Today is the last day to get a 20% off. आज आपको 20% off मिलेगा. There's a discount going on Unacademy. That's about it. If you would like to join, please do. If you, that's about it. All right. I don't want to say if you don't want to join, don't join. That's pretty common sense. Join if you would like to. चलिए यहाँ पे focus करते हैं. Okay. Thank you so much, ma'am. What happened, Samya? Class is not over. What happened? Why are we saying thank you? Now let's see what kind of figures it actually contains. The Bender 2, which is the more recent version, contains 16 figures. Figures are generally like this. यहाँ पे कैसे कैसे shapes देते हैं आपको, ऐसे देते हैं. ये देखिए. I thought class over हो गई. क्या यार, ऐसे कैसे? I told you it will take around 1.5 hours. सुनो चुपचाप, focus here. Okay. Accuracy and organization of the figures. Yes. Interpretation depends on form of the test in use. Okay. Rotation, distortion, symmetry and perseveration. इनका मतलब क्या है? कभी कभी आपका जो participant है वो rotated figure draw करेगा. There should be symmetry also, no? Let's say if I'm drawing a circle, this is not a circle. I draw better with a pencil, but there should be symmetry in the figure. You see over here, these are both symmetric figures. मतलब इनको अगर आप half में divide करेंगे तो same आएगा. So we'll check whether there is any symmetry at all. Distortion, क्या figure गलत draw किया है? क्या half उसका miss किया है? What if a person doesn't have their half visual field working well? तो वो आधा ही figure draw करेंगे. बाकी का distort कर देंगे if they are not clearly able to see it or understand it. Perseveration means drawing the same figure again and again, and perseveration often indicates frontal lobe damage. ठीक है? फ्रंटल लोब डैमेज में परसेवरेशन हम देखते हैं, मतलब सेम शेप बार 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 ड्रॉ करना, इवन दो देयर आर 16 डिफरेंट फिगर्स. ओके, ऑलराइट. एंड देन रोटेशन. आप सोचो ये ऐसे है तो ये ऐसे ही ड्रॉ करना है. अब इसको कोई ऐसे ड्रॉ करेगा तो प्रॉब्लम है ना, रोटेटेड फिगर. Okay, that means maybe their visual field is not working well, or they are not able to comprehend कि ये किस side से होना चाहिए figure. So all these 4 factors are important here, especially for clinical psychology students. Please pay lots of attention to these. You can pause the video later, you can watch it again and you can make notes. Not a problem. ठीक है? Okay, चलिए. Absolutely. The next test is my absolute favorite test. A lot of exams will ask you which one is a very, very commonly used, executive functioning ka test. This test is very, very well indicative of any executive damage. Okay. And it is a very commonly used test of executive function. यहाँ पे particularly frontal lobe damage हम check करते हैं. So fun. So there are many cards and हम ये participant के सामने रखते हैं. Okay, alright. We keep like this 4 cards we keep. We don't tell the participant on what basis they are supposed to identify. उनको हम जैसे cards खेलते हैं ना, एक एक दिखा के बोलते हैं कि match करो. Okay? Participant को आप 4 cards सामने रखेंगे और बोलेंगे कि मैच करो. आप नहीं बोलेंगे कि मैचिंग का क्राइटेरिया क्या है. यू आर नॉट गोइंग टू टेल द पार्टिसिपेंट व्हाट द मैचिंग क्राइटेरिया इज. लेट देम मैच. Once they figure it out, let's say I actually want them to match the shape, because when they say this, I will say no. Then they will say okay this. I will say okay. Then they will get used to understanding that I am actually asking on the basis of shape. है ना? तो फिर मैं जब मुझे समझ आएगा कि पार्टिसिपेंट को पता चल गया है कि मैं इस बेसिस पे पूछ रहा हूँ या इस बेसिस पे पूछ रहे हो, तो मैं चेंज कर दूंगी क्राइटेरिया टू मैच, एंड आई विल कीप डूइंग दिस. डज दिस एक्चुअली चेक ऑन अ लॉट ऑफ वेरियस पैरामीटर्स ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शन? क्या हम कह सकते हैं कि ये बहुत सारे पैरामीटर्स एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शन के चेक कर लेता है? Spontaneous reasoning, quick to change, non-rigidity, flexibility, what do I say? Quick decision making, planning ahead, predicting the pattern, what is going to be next. क्योंकि कितने ही options हैं, 3 या 4 options हैं यहाँ पे. तो ये this is a very very good test of executive functioning. I'm not sure, but I think it is one of the it is definitely one of the most used tests. Is it the most used test? Please check. But it is one of the most used tests for checking for executive functioning and frontal lobe damage, because this will very clearly indicate perseverance. अब जहाँ पे perseverance या frontal lobe damage होगी ना, they will be checking only on the basis of one characteristic. मतलब वो पूरे टेस्ट में आपको सोचो कि वो कह रहे हैं red, they are matching on the basis of color. तो वो पूरे टेस्ट में आप कितने भी कार्ड्स बदलो, वो सिर्फ कलर के बेसिस पे इंटरप्रेट करेंगे. ओके, पर्सन हु हैज फ्रंटल लोब डैमेज, they will show perseverance here. They will only, if they are interpreting on the basis of color, then they will only interpret on the basis of color. कलर पे इंटरप्रेट करना है तो कलर पे ही इंटरप्रेट करेंगे और कुछ नहीं करेंगे. This is really, really interesting, and to administer this test is absolutely fun. If you have never do, if you have never do it, if you have never done it, please go ahead and do it. This is so much fun to do. ठीक है, तो मैंने आपको एक्सप्लेन कर दिया है क्या होता है यहाँ पे. इफ यू आर गुड टू गो, लेट मी. ओके, please check between Bender, Gestalt and this. I've forgotten the year. I think this should be 1948. कोई check करके confirm कर दो ना. This should be 1948. I should have just written down. I was going through my notes in the morning. नेक्स्ट मीटअप पर यही करेंगे, ऐसा ही करेंगे. मैम क्वेश्चन कैसे पूछते हैं? ये पूछते हैं कि विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग इज अ टेस्ट ऑफ एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शनिंग, विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग इज अ टेस्ट ऑफ परसिवरेंस. तो वहां पे आप ये चूज करेंगे, विस्कॉन्सिन कार्ड सॉर्टिंग टास्क. ओके, और दे विल टेल यू विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग टेस्ट. ये देखो आप, प्राइम टेस्ट हियर फॉर एग्जीक्यूटिव फंक्शंस इज विस्कॉन्सिन कार्ड सॉर्टिंग. प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग एफिशिएंसी, तो आपको ये भी कहेंगे विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग यूजेस मल्टीपल कार्ड्स वेयर द प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग एफिशिएंसी. मैम 1938 फॉर बेंडर जेस्टाल्ट. फॉर बेंडर जेस्टाल्ट ना 1938. इसके लिए फिर 48 होगा. प्रगति मैम, इफ यू से ओनली 1938, उसमें क्या समझ आएगा? आई एम टेलिंग यू तो मुझे. यस मैम, टी और कॉफी हो गया. या विस्कॉन्सिन 1948. चलो, जीनियस. 1948. Thank you for confirming, guys. Chal. Okay, so you see what all are executive function tests. So you see what all tests in turn measure executive functioning. मतलब ये category test है ना आपके Halsted rating में. Halsted rating, it is there or not? It's there. That means Halsted rating also checks for executive functioning. चलो, so you see trail making test also. ठीक है. Again, please take this table is from Kaplan and Sadek. It's actually beautifully presented over there. वहाँ पे specifically लिखा है कि executive functioning, language functioning के particular subsets tests कौन से हैं. That's really important for clinical psychology students. If you want me to, I can take a class on what are the particular, or giving you an overview of specific tests used for specific function or denoting specific dysfunction. Just leave it in the comments below and I'll take it up. I'm going to sit tomorrow and plan for October anyway. I have to plan October. आज सबकी एनर्जी ज्यादा हाई है मैम, अच्छा है ना. At Thursday everybody is drained and Friday everybody has new life. I think me included. चलो ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं. Now we talk about PGI battery of brain dysfunction, which was one of the first tests to be developed in India. PGI because Postgraduate Institute of Chandigarh, है ना? Chandigarh only. Chandigarh? Yeah. Bolo issue. All right. Now this was created by Prasad N. Verma in 1990. This actually is again test battery है, तो can I say इसमें काफी छोटे छोटे टेस्ट होंगे? Can I say that? Who is from Chandigarh? Tell us. Issue only. I know, I know. PGI is that only. This is your institute in Chandigarh. हाँ हाँ, पता है, हाँ. बताइए. बताइए तो. Are we basically going to have multiple tests as part of the test battery? बैटरी का मतलब ही है कि यहाँ और दूसरे टेस्ट होंगे. All right, okay. भाटिया शॉर्ट स्केल. भाटिया इज अ परफॉर्मेंस टेस्ट, तो भाटिया की शॉर्ट स्केल यहाँ पे इंक्लूडेड होगी. Verbal adult intelligence scale. Verbal components are always used in intelligence tests because they help us understand the functioning of the left hemisphere and also of the frontal lobe, especially verbal fluency. PGI memory scale, जो ये है, rote memory, recent memory, mental balance, checks for delayed recall, immediate recall, and so on. There is also Bender visual motor gestalt test, which checks for your psychomotor abilities and perseverance. ये भी frontal lobe damage के लिए check करती है. Nahor Benson test is also a test of executive functioning. Executive function. Okay? All right. So norms are developed for 20 to 50-year-olds. And then what else? Factor analysis is used, 2 levels of gender, 3 levels of education, and 5 levels of age. हाँ जी, तो ये यही है. 2007 में इसका सेकंड एडिशन आया था. सेम पीपल. ओके. भाटिया शॉर्ट स्केल, वर्बल अडल्ट इंटेलिजेंस स्केल, पीजीआई मेमोरी स्केल, बेंडर विजुअल मोटर जेस्टाल्ट टेस्ट, एंड देन नाहर बेंसन टेस्ट. ठीक है. ओके. इलनेस, एक्सीडेंट, इंजरी की वजह से ये कॉग्निटिव डेफिसिट चेक करता है. Helpful in planning rehabilitation for these people or any social support or any compensation that we are to give them. This was created or published for the first time in 1990. लेकिन इससे पुराना भी एक टेस्ट है, which was actually the Nimhans test. Nimhans test is said to be the first test developed in India. Hmm? All right. Again, this is a collection of other tests. आप यहाँ पे भी देख रहे हैं. यहाँ पे it is a collection of 5 other tests. Batteries are generally a collection of tests. It is not a single test. The Nimhans का जो develop किया था, R. Tripathi, I think I should just write down, next time. I'll write down, guys. R. Tripathi and others basically created the Nimhans test in 1990. This was the first Indian test to be developed. It actually has a multiple range of tests which are included in this. इसमें काफी सारे tests, around 20. Okay? और आप देखो particularly for visuospatial perception, what are we using? Coase block design test, Bender Gestalt, visuomotor test. तो इसमें और sub tests हैं. ठीक है. It has multiple sub tests which are basically used to check one by one for all lobes of for functioning of all lobes. There are separate tests for frontal lobe function. There are separate tests for parietal lobe function. There are separate tests for particular lobes of functioning. ठीक है. All right, it is a lobe function test battery. Absolutely, one by one lobes की function check की जाती है, and it is based on LIRIA's principles of cerebral localization and lateralization of higher mental functions. Make sense ना? ये जो निमहांस बैटरी है आपकी, ये भी लूरिया के ही प्रिंसिपल्स पे बेस्ड है, लेकिन इसको ऐसे क्रिएट किया गया है कि ये हम इंडिया में अप्लाई कर सकें. ठीक है. अराउंड 20 इसमें काफी बहुत सारे टेस्ट हैं, और ये टेस्ट एक एक आपके लोब की, जो आपके 4 लोब्स हैं सेरिब्रल कॉर्टेक्स के, उनकी फंक्शन, लोकलाइजेशन ऑफ फंक्शन, और 2 हेमिस्फीयर्स में लेटरलाइजेशन भी चेक करता है. ओके. ऑल राइट. वंडरफुल. What all is included here? Let's try to understand. Motor scales are there, tactile scales are there, visual scales are there, receptive, just like the Luria Nebraska. आप देखो ये Luria Nebraska पे ही based है, right? And the age range is 15 to 80 years. 15 to 80 years. This is AIMS. Sorry. This is AIMS. This is not Nimhans. Nimhans is so much only. About 20 tests and we check for low function. Now we will check for the All India Institute of Medical Sciences में जो बनाया है. This was the first Hindi test battery to be developed in India. Okay, the AIMS test battery. And now I forgot who created it. Somebody's name with S. I should just write it down here. 1 minute. हाँ चलो ठीक है. So let's try to discuss what is happening here. There are a total of 160 items in the AIMS test battery and this is also based on the LIRIA Nebraska battery. लेकिन ये पहली हिंदी scale थी जो develop हुई थी. Whereas you have your Nimhans वाला, this is not Hindi. Surya Gupta, absolutely. I'm growing old, guys. I don't remember things anymore. Even if I check right before class. And this was developed Surya Gupta et al. It was not only developed by him, but along with other people. तो ये battery कब create की गई थी? In 1994. This is also based on the LIRIA Nebraska neuropsychological battery itself. So Nimhans battery as well as your AIMS battery are both based on LIRIA Nebraska. Can I say this is also based on your LIRIA Nebraska battery? Yes, absolutely. This is also based on your LIRIA Nebraska neuropsychological battery and you will see the age range is around 15 to 80 years. It consists of 160 items. यहाँ पे 160 items हैं और 10 basic scales हैं. 3 घंटे का time यहाँ पे लगता है. It takes 3 hours to actually go ahead and complete this test. All right, this was the only or this was the first indigenous developed test battery. So this is developed in Hindi itself. All right, 10 basic scales and 4 secondary scales. So you have the pathognomonic scale and then you have your left and right hemisphere scales as well. As you will see, basically जो LIRIA Nebraska में हम measure करते हैं वो हम यहाँ पे भी measure करते हैं. ये हिंदी में है. Okay, all right. Who has lunch at 12 o'clock? Chalo. Are we understanding? If we have doubts, please ask. Ankita, आप क्लास पे ध्यान दो. Only you want to talk about random stuff. अभी पूछोगे फिर से MPhil का क्या फायदा है? So focus on class. You are here, you want to study, you study. Yes. All right, guys. That is about it. Only took an hour. Only took an hour. Ha, chalo. That's about it. That is about it. We are actually done. So we have covered all of our important, just an overview of all of our important tests. That's about it. I hope you have a great day. Where is the thank you ending slide? Arya got deleted or what? Okay, guys. Never mind. Happy Friday to all of you. I think we are done here. Okay. All right. Yeah, I had a lot of fun talking to all of you. I probably accidentally deleted. Yeah, I had a lot of fun talking to all of you. I hope you liked the class. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, support the channel. That's about it. And then I will see you next week with a lot more classes. All right. Chaliye. Please have a great day. Take very good care of yourself. Happy weekend to all of you.